In the beginning, there was only Ifrit, or so starts the creation myth of the amalj'aa. Alone with nothing, Ifrit created the world and filled it with beasts of all shapes and sizes, but without reason or intellect, each of them simply there to fight a mindless battle for survival forever, for Ifrit's amusement. Until one day, Ifrit took note of one of his creations, a great lizard people who were notably ferocious in their fight. And as he observed these lizard creations, he became quite pleased with them, for their strength and ferocity. For this reason, he gifted them a flicker of his primordial flame, and as the sacred fire took place in the lizard's soul, it burned away all frailty and weakness. And from these ashes stepped the first warriors of the amalj'aa. This was said to have happened in the land of Sanrak, currently located in Thanalan. But over the centuries, Sanrak has changed. Once simply the holy land of the amalj'aa, it now is part of southern Thanalan, and the amalj'aa see all of the people of Ul'dah and others who come to this land as invaders, leading to many long and difficult conflicts between them and the people of Ul'dah. As the Warrior of Light, we enter into the century-old battle just after we joined the Scions of the Seven Dawn. We have just finished examining the headquarters, learned some of the history of the Scions, and now it's time for us to go on our first mission.
I would assign you your first task. Urianger, have the documents arrived from the students of Baldessian?
Aye, my lady. They arrived but recently.
We have received a request for aid from the Immortal Flames. Thancred, would you do the honors?
It would be my pleasure. Some days ago, a crystal caravan registered to amalj'aa and Sons mineral concern was waylaid and divested of its cargo. But there is more. Within a bell of the robbery, several people were reported missing from the shantytown outside the city.
At a glance, one would assume the involvement of bandits, kidnappers, and coincidence. Such crimes are hardly uncommon, and the Immortal Flames deal with their like almost every day. However, this time we have reason to believe that a primal is involved.
Aye, the evidence left behind implicates the amalj'aa, who are known worshippers of Ifrit. If we then consider the objects that were taken, there is no room left for doubt. The crimes were committed in the name of a primal.
That you may better understand the nature of our struggle with the primals, I would have you play the leading role in this investigation.
A primal is a mythical being made manifest through faith and a whole lot of concentrated ether. The form it takes depends on the summoner, and in this case of the amalj'aa, they summon no other than Ifrit, Lord of the Inferno. And so this is what our first mission relates to. There are worries that the amalj'aa might have summoned Ifrit or are about to do so. And one of the factors of primal is that primals hold this terrible power called tempering, allowing them to bind any person to their will. The tempered individual is instilled with fanatical loyalty, and from that moment, their sole purpose in life is to summon and sustain the primal. And with the information that people are being kidnapped and crystals are vanishing, we need to look into this. Thancred is the one who knows this area the best, so he is asked to accompany us. He believes the best start is to investigate the abductions. So we head to Camp Drybone, which is the last confirmed location of many of the missing people. There we find a man named Isambard. He was expecting us, as a word was sent ahead by Minfilia, along with a warning to stay away from the local amalj'aa. Isambard tells us there have been some brutal murders of the callers at the Church of St. Adamalanda, which they reside just up the road from Camp Drybone. Isambard asks us to find the remains of the victims and bring them to him for proper care. We head out and do find the place of attack and the corpses, but as we're about to pick them up, we are attacked by the amalj'aa. So that pretty much confirms it. They are involved. We deal with them and gather up the bodies into our invisible bag of holding. I'm honestly unsure where I carry them. And then we bring them to Isambard and tell him about the amalj'aa we spotted. He says this feels rather odd. Yes, from time to time they have had to deal with occasional amalj'aa raiding party. But for people to go missing in these kind of numbers, it makes us feel like there is someone else involved. But with so many people passing through every day, how can they know who it is? He figures we should speak to someone who knows the common folk well. He points us towards a merchant named August, who was born in Drybone and grew up in the nearby Golden Bazaar. That man might just be the source of information we need. We do find him at the nearby inn and are sorely disappointed because we know him. We met him once before in Ul'dah, where he was threatening a refugee woman. And he also remembers us very well. He isn't exactly keen to speak with us, but with a note from Isambard, he does talk to us nonetheless. He tells us that lately he has been getting these desperate people to do some hard labor for little to no pay, because there's no work to have, and, well, they're desperate. That's disgusting. So we find him quite useless and head out to speak to some of the common folk around town. But everyone is on edge and afraid to become the next victim of the kidnappers, so they don't want to speak to us. We bring this information to Isambard, and he is of course disappointed in how August treats the people, but seems not really surprised. Instead, he tells us one thing that people have in common is they are all pretty religious, so perhaps they would speak more openly to somebody from the church. If we were to ask around there, we might get some information. And in fact, he has also a reason to send us up there, as one of the corpses is ready and he would like us to bring it up to the church for burial. We do find Marquez, a man who seems slightly out of it. Poor man, probably been through something heavy. In fact, I remember Marquez. He'll become important later on in our journey. But he's nice enough, he directs us to where to bury the body, so we waddle up the hill and do just that. And with the body in the final resting place, we head on to our second task, asking about the missing people. We are directed to Sister Orsien, who tells us that indeed the people speak to her. She promises to give us any information she has, and she apologizes for Marquez's behavior, though I didn't find anything bad about it. He's a bit strange, but not rude or mean or anything. But apparently he did manage to insult Thancred somehow. So at least we know Thancred is around somewhere. In fact, it would be good to know where he is. Wasn't he supposed to do this with us? We do head back to Camp Drybone, inform Isambard of what happened, and finally do find Thancred. It turns out he has also been trying to get information out of August. And he has a theory. As we noticed, the people only speak openly to the clergy, and Thancred has a feeling Sister Orsien is not so innocent in all of this. Also, he is just positive he has met this Marquez guy somewhere before, though he doesn't remember where. And then he's off, as we remain with Isambard, who is positive that this is just wrong. Sister Orsien isn't somebody who would go around kidnapping people. She is a hard-working, kind woman, often traveling to the Golden Bazaar to speak to the children. But he doesn't want to have these suspicions just hanging around, so he sends us to the Golden Bazaar to speak to the children. Perhaps they know something. We do head over to the small settlement of the Golden Bazaar, and it doesn't take us long to find the urchins. But we barely manage to say a hello before they're asking us to save Sister Orsien. She usually comes to read to the children, but one of them told her they lost a shiny thing, precious to them. So she went outside the village to seek it out, and she hasn't come back. We do rush out only to find her surrounded by walking corpses. Ah yes, that zombie plague that comes from Ul'dah's history. If you're interested on why we have zombie situation, check out my origin story on Ul'dah. It's interesting. But we quickly come to her defense and assist her. She thanks us and informs us the shiny thing was actually a ring passed to the orphan child from their mother before she passed away. And thankfully she has found it and will be heading back now. So yeah, She doesn't really sound like a kidnapper to me. We do head back to Camp Drybone, where we go inform Thancred that he was definitely wrong on this one. But he isn't there. Instead we find Isambard, who thanks us for rescuing the woman, and then he rents out the room for her at the inn so she can recover from any sustained injuries. But in the meantime, we head out to find Thancred in a nearby amalj'aa encampment to the southeast. We do head over there hoping to find some evidence of who is behind these disappearances. So we sneak into the camp, able to hide easily from the oversized lizard with our small size. We scatter between pots, wagons and crates, and finally come across a peculiar parchment. It is a pamphlet reading, "See the wealth of Nald to the hands of your children." Now, why would the amalj'aa have a pamphlet from a church? We bring this to Thancred, who deduces this must be a note for an assembly of some sort, probably where the poor can get some work. And while it looks like it could be written by one of the priests, the writing is sloppy and the language is a bit off, making it clear to him that this is actually a fake, not truly written by one of the order, but instead made to look that way. But just to be sure, we decide to ask Sister Urchin about it, just to confirm our suspicion. And as we show the pamphlet to her, she is horrified. She confirms this is not from anyone in the order. And in fact, when she thinks about it, a few weeks ago, some clothing from the church went missing. So, theoretically, someone could be dressing up as a priest and handing out these flyers to lure in victims. But while we have an idea what the trap might look like, we don't know where the person is. Thankfully though, Thancred is a master of the art of disguise and brings us a plan right away. While we don't know where or who the culprit is, we could set ourselves up as a bait and draw them out. All we need is some suitable outfits and to act like we're poor in the search for work. So we change our clothing, take on the appearance of these down-on-the-luck people looking for work, and then we put on our most convincing sad face and wander around the camp asking for work. Unsurprisingly, there's no work to be had, and many of the people just try to chase us away. In fact, giving us one good information as they do so. Apparently, people like us are staying around a pond just north of town. So we figure that might be a good place to spring our trap. We inform Thancred, and he is convinced we caused enough bother by pestering everyone that there is no doubt the mysterious kidnapper has noticed. Next, we head up to the pond and settle there for a long wait, which turns out much shorter than expected. We've barely been there an hour before a robed figure arrives, dressed as one of the priests and offering us work and handing out one of the pamphlets. Though it's almost comically easy to identify the man. The bastard who has been tormenting refugees and conning hard labor out of them, now he's also kidnapping them. I hate this man. He quickly claims he was only doing this to protect his people, that he only did this because the amalj'aa were raiding the Golden Bazaar, so he struck up a deal with them. But their demands were just extreme. Even though Angus did fulfill every one, first by getting the schedule for the crystal shipment, and then by luring the people to them and handing them over. And we don't really believe him because he is an asshole. After all, he could have gone to the Immortal Flames for protection, not just sell out innocent people. Thancred gives him a little push, and the man is pretty quick to admit the coin was also really good. Ew, we are just utterly disgusted. We do ask him if he was also leaking the patrol routes of the Immortal Flames, though Angus swears up and down it was not him. And maybe this might be the truth, is hard to tell. It doesn't really matter to us, as he is gonna face some consequences, no matter what. Thancred tells us he will handle contacting the Immortal Flames, and asks us to go to Minfilia to inform her on what has happened. What follows is a short trip back to our headquarters, and few quick errands for Minfilia before we are contacted again by Thancred. They have managed to extract information from Angus, and it turns out he is about to meet with the amalj'aa soon, and the Immortal Flames plan to ambush them. And we're gonna be there to assist. Only us though, as Thancred has to deal with some other matter, so we will be the official Scion representative. We return to Camp Drybone and seek out the Flame Sergeant, who will head this operation. He's pleased to have us and explains the goal of the mission is to use Ungus the Spade, ambush the amalj'aa at the meeting, capture them, and get them to tell us where they're keeping the kidnapped victims. So we head with them out to the meeting spot in a place known as the Invisible City, which are actually just old ruins. And there we hide and lie in wait till Ungus arrives, and the amalj'aa. Ungus plays his part pretty well. And when the amalj'aa least expected, we spring out into action surrounding them, only for Ungus to start laughing, and one of our own men to start laughing as well. And that's when we realize that Ungus has played us. And not just him, but the laughing soldier is a traitor as well. This is the bastard who has been leaking out the patrol route. The two have been working together for many moons, and they managed to warn the amalj'aa, with multiple amalj'aa surrounding us. And while we bravely try to fight them, we are soon overwhelmed and knocked out. We come around into the cave with both the soldiers, the sergeant, and also the missing people. So at least we did find them, even if it wasn't quite the way we planned. And at this time, there's little we can do but wait, worrying about what fate awaits us. As the most likely thing to happen is we are to be used as sacrifices for Ifrit. Eventually, we get that confirmed. We are pulled out of the cave under a black sun, where the ritual to summon the primal begins. We watch in horror as Ifrit emerges, and we are offered up as sacrifices. At least there is a small joy in this. The two traitors are here also, to be used as sacrifices. This is what happens when you work with tempered amalj'aa, so at least we can face our death with some joy. Ifrit rears up and blasts a blue flame over all, tempering every soul here and around us. We watch as the men who fought with us and the men who betrayed us all become mindless worshippers of Ifrit. All except us, as the echo protects us from the tempering. Ifrit of course senses Heidel's blessing and is furious. So our fate instead is to be death. But we aren't going down easily. We fight Ifrit, and we are lucky to survive. But in the end, Ifrit falls, leaving behind a crystal. And just like it happened when we found the first crystal back in our starting city, pick this one up and are taken for a moment into Heidel's realm, showing us that we managed to gather 2 out of 6 crystals. And as we stand there, 8 days after the short vision, Tancred shows up. Finally. He wasn't very helpful here against Ifrit, but he does take down the remaining amalj'aa, and he did bring more immortal flames to deal with the captives. All in all, a mission well done. We found the kidnappers, we found the victims, and we killed the primal. Not bad for our first ever mission for the Scions. And as we head back to the waking sand, we don't notice that we were actually being watched. Above on the cliff are Nero Tolskeva and Livia Sastunius, a pair of high-ranking Garleans, watching from above. Nero was observing as the primal was summoned, taking reading of the primal power. But the data was found lacking. The primal was weaker than expected. Though he can't determine if it was because the primal was truly weaker, or if the reading is faulty. Not to mention, he's relying on previous readings from before the calamity, which isn't really the most reliable data anymore. And as the two leave to do whatever they're about to do, Nero does wonder if we could prove to be trouble down the road. After all, we are more powerful than expected. But that's a problem for another time. In the meantime, we head back to the headquarters, where we spot Tancred and Minfilia talking. Tancred seems to be worried. He believes he failed us by not being there when we were captured and had to face Ifrit. And more than that, he speaks about failing the Scions. He seems to be struggling with some self-confidence issues right now. But as soon as we enter, he drops the subject and we are praised for the success of our first mission. Minfilia does warn us that similar incidents of crystals being stolen have been happening in other regions as well, meaning more primals are probably about to be summoned. But right now we have earned a little bit of rest. But before we go, Ifrit has one last thing to tell us. Those who are tempered cannot be cured. Their mind is owned by the primal, and their only life goal is to summon the primal, sustain it, and bring it more followers. And because of that, everyone who stood with us during the Ifrit attack, be the traitors, the immortal flames, or the innocent victims of kidnapping, all of them will be executed. And that is the dark truth of dealing with primals. Ifrit believes we deserve to know. And with that, our first mission ends. We did take down a primal, we did find the victims, and we didn't save a single one. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you found it interesting. If you like this content, please do all the good YouTube stuff. But tell me, do you remember your first encounter with Ifrit? I was really stunned the first time I encountered Ifrit. I did not expect the whole fire and flames and the amazing fight that followed. But what about you? Did you enjoy Ifrit the first time around? Do you still enjoy fighting Ifrit from time to time when he comes up in roulettes? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you like this stuff, do remember to do all the good YouTube stuff. And whatever you do, I hope you have a lovely day.